something quietly historic is about to unfold in the heart of the Church. No trumpet sounded. No major press conference. Just a quiet notice, tucked within official Vatican channels and liturgical updates. A new votive Mass has been added to the Roman Missal. But for those paying attention, this wasn't just another footnote in the long annals of Catholic liturgical tradition. It was a signal. A signal that something is shifting. That the Church, while timeless, is also listening. On July 9th, Pope Leo XIV is set to celebrate the very first Mass for the care of creation. For most, it sounds simple enough, a Mass focusing on the environment. A beautiful intention, perhaps, but certainly not controversial. But within the walls of the Vatican, and in the hearts of Catholics across the globe, this moment lands with a quiet intensity. Because this Mass is more than it seems. It's not just about forests and rivers. It's about how the Church sees the world God made, and how it prays about it. It's also about how the Church chooses to evolve in her liturgical life, without abandoning what she has guarded for centuries. Let's clear something up immediately. Despite the headlines, this is not a brand new rite. The Mass for the care of creation is not a replacement for the Novus Ordo. It's not an experimental format. It's a votive Mass, a variation already well established in the life of the Church. The Roman Missal includes dozens of these, prayers and liturgies tailored to particular needs or intentions. There are votive Masses for peace, for vocations, for rain, for the sick, for persecuted Christians. The Mass for creation is now the 50th in this collection. But it's the theme, and the timing, that makes this one feel different. As wildfires rage, oceans warm, and nations argue about climate, the Pope is choosing to respond, not with policy, but with prayer. Not with protests, but with liturgy. And that choice matters. Because in the Catholic worldview, worship shapes reality. How we pray reflects what we believe. And what we believe shapes how we live. But let's go deeper. Why now? And why Pope Leo? To understand the weight of this moment, we need to revisit a document that shaped the Church's environmental voice for the past decade, Laudato Si, the encyclical by Pope Francis released in 2015. In it, Francis urged humanity to embrace what he called integral ecology, a spiritual, moral, and social commitment to care for our common home. It was passionate, poetic, and prophetic. But Laudato Si was a letter. Now that letter has been folded into prayer. And Pope Leo, the man many believed would shift away from Francis's ecological tone, is the one personally celebrating it. This surprises some. After all, Pope Leo's early papacy was marked by quiet observation, not sweeping declarations. He's shown a careful, balanced approach, especially on controversial issues like the traditional Latin Mass or doctrinal disputes. But here, with little fanfare, he's making a statement: creation matters, and so does how we pray about it. Archbishop Vittorio Viola, secretary of the Dicastery for Divine Worship, helped unveil the new Mass text. In a recent interview, he explained its purpose. This isn't about politicizing the altar. It's about restoring the sense that creation is not a backdrop to salvation, it's a participant in it. The earth groans with us, and rejoices with us. And truly, that insight is ancient. The Church has always had a theology of nature. Long before phrases like carbon footprint or climate justice appeared, the Scriptures spoke in the language of creation. In the Psalms, rivers clap their hands. Mountains leap. Trees shout for joy. The prophet Isaiah imagines a day when the lion lies with the lamb, and deserts bloom. But perhaps the most stunning hymn of nature comes from the book of Daniel. 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, had been thrown into a blazing furnace for refusing to worship a golden idol. But instead of cursing their fate, they sing. And what do they sing about? Creation. Bless the Lord, all you works of the Lord. Sun and moon, bless the Lord. Stars of heaven, bless the Lord. Ice and snow, bless the Lord. Dolphins and all water creatures, bless the Lord. In the middle of a fire, surrounded by death, they saw the beauty of life. That's not just poetry. That's theology. It's the same theology St. Paul speaks of in his letter to the Romans. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. In other words, creation is a mirror. Not to be worshipped, but to point us toward the one who is. This is where the Mass for the care of creation draws its soul. It's not about nature for nature's sake. It's about nature as gift, and as signpost. And this matters because in a world filled with ecological despair and ideological confusion, the Church is offering something deeper: wonder. There's a temptation in our time to reduce everything to activism or outrage. To treat the environment like a battlefield between right and left. But Pope Leo's choice bypasses all of that. He isn't issuing a decree. He's offering a prayer. And that prayer is rooted not in political urgency, but in spiritual clarity. The Catechism of the Catholic Church makes this clear. Paragraph 2415 teaches that the seventh commandment enjoins respect for the integrity of creation, and that animals, plants, and inanimate beings are by nature destined for the common good of past, present, and future humanity. But it also affirms that man is the summit of the Creator's work. He alone is made in God's image. He alone is called to steward creation, not to dominate it, but to lift it toward its ultimate destiny. This balance is key. Because without it, we risk falling into two extremes, either worshipping the world or exploiting it. The Mass for creation walks the narrow road between them, reminding us that the earth is sacred, not because it's divine, but because it was made by the divine. And so, the prayers of this new Mass will echo this vision. The opening collect speaks of the beauty of the earth, which reflects the glory of its Maker. The offertory prayer asks that we may offer not only bread and wine, but our gratitude for the gift of creation. And the post-communion prayer speaks of harmony with all creatures, born of grace, not just nature. These are not slogans. They are invitations. Invitations to see the world differently. To see it sacramentally. Because for Catholics, creation has always had a liturgical dimension. The altar is built from wood. The wine from grapes. The host from grain. Water is poured for baptism. Oil anoints for healing. Fire burns in vigil lamps. Smoke rises in incense. Every element of nature is drawn into worship. And now, with this new Mass, the Church is reminding us that even the earth itself longs to be part of the liturgy. So why does this matter right now? Because the world is weary. People feel disconnected, from God, from nature, from each other. The more technologically advanced we become, the more spiritually starved we feel. We live in cities of steel and glass, forgetting the silence of forests and the song of birds. Children grow up never planting seeds. Adults rush past sunrises without noticing. The world has become loud, but the soul longs for stillness. And maybe, just maybe, this new Mass is a gentle call to return. To remember. To worship not just in words but in wonder. This is not a return to pantheism. It's not Gaia spirituality. It's Catholic sacramentality at its best, where even the breeze can become a breath of grace, and the rising sun becomes a Eucharistic symbol of resurrection. And Pope Leo knows the stakes. That's why he's chosen to celebrate this Mass privately, not before grand crowds or cameras, but in the quiet grounds of Castel Gandolfo, his summer retreat. There, surrounded by olive trees and lakes, he will lift the host not just for people, but for the whole world. Because that's what the Mass is. It's not a private devotion. It's the highest prayer of the Church, on behalf of all creation. As the Eucharistic prayer proclaims, "Heaven and earth are full of your glory." This is the vision. Not a trendy innovation. Not a passing phase. But a sacred act. And as Pope Leo prepares to offer this Mass, the Church, and the world, are watching. Not because it's flashy, but because it's faithful. In the next part, we'll dive into the actual structure of the Mass for the care of creation, what it says, what it means, and what it might signal for the Church's future. But for now, remember this. Every leaf, every mountain, every wave, every creature, bless the Lord. Because creation still sings. And the Church is learning to sing with it. The date is set. July 9th. The location? Castel Gandolfo, Pope Leo XIV's quiet summer retreat nestled among the rolling Alban hills outside of Rome. No massive congregation. No global broadcast. Just a pope, a chalice, and a small circle of collaborators gathered in prayer. But make no mistake, what will happen that morning may echo far beyond those garden walls. For the first time in over a decade, a new liturgical formula has been added to the Church's official treasury of prayers. And Pope Leo will be the one to offer it first. The Mass for the Care of Creation might seem subtle in its presentation, but its symbolism is weighty. Because in the Catholic Church, nothing in the liturgy is accidental, not the gestures, not the prayers, not even the setting. Every detail is a message. And this time, that message is profoundly spiritual. Creation belongs on the altar. So, what's actually different about this new Mass? What makes it unique? Let's start with what hasn't changed. The overall structure of the liturgy remains intact. You'll still have the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. The readings, the Eucharistic prayers, the communion rite, these are all familiar. This isn't a reinvention of the wheel. It's a deepening of intention. What's new are the proper prayers, those elements of the Mass that change depending on the feast or occasion. For this votive Mass, 3 moments have been composed with special care. The Collect opening prayer. The prayer over the offerings. The prayer after communion. Let's walk through each of them. 1. The Collect, a call to all. The Collect is often the prayer that sets the tone. It gathers the intentions of the faithful and lifts them to God. In the Mass for the Care of Creation, the Collect begins. O God, who made all things good and entrusted the earth to our care, awaken in us a sense of reverent wonder, that we may walk gently upon the land and honor the work of your hands. This is not activism. This is adoration. The language is gentle yet firm. It invites the soul into gratitude, not guilt. It frames creation not as a crisis, but as a gift. And in doing so, it reminds the faithful that caring for the environment is not a political obligation, it's a spiritual response. 2. The prayer over the offerings, stewardship meets sacrifice. At the altar, the bread and wine are presented as symbols of our lives, our labor, our world. In this votive Mass, the new prayer reads, Accept, O Lord, the fruits of the earth and the work of human hands, and grant that this offering, united with our care for your creation, may rise as a fragrant gift in your sight. The imagery is stunning, offering creation back to the Creator. It also teaches something vital, that liturgy is not separate from life. What we bring to the altar should reflect how we live outside the sanctuary. If we offer polluted hearts and neglected stewardship, we are not offering our best. But if we bring care, sacrifice, and harmony with God's creation, the Mass becomes a full-circle act of worship. 3. The prayer after communion, harmony and hope. After receiving the body and blood of Christ, the faithful are dismissed with strength. This new prayer concludes, Nourished by this sacrament of life, may we live as caretakers of your creation, seeking justice for the earth and peace among your creatures, through Christ our Lord. Here, the focus is mission. The Mass doesn't end at the final blessing. It sends us out to live differently. And notice the words, justice for the earth. Some may find that language modern or even political, but in Catholic teaching, justice simply means giving what is due. And creation, as God's handiwork, is due our reverence and responsibility. But even beyond the words, this Mass is dripping with symbolic meaning. Consider the location, Castel Gandolfo. It's not just a vacation home. It's a space that speaks of reflection, simplicity, and nature. The property includes lakes, gardens, olive groves. For centuries, popes have retreated there to pray, rest, and listen. That Pope Leo chose this setting is no accident. He's not just talking about creation, he's praying within it. Now imagine the visuals. The Pope walking into an open-air chapel. Sunlight breaking through trees. The breeze gently moving his chasuble. The altar dressed with local flowers, the host lifted skyward, the chalice glinting like dew. That's not a spectacle. That's sacred. Some might worry this is an innovation too far. that focusing on nature might shift our gaze away from the eternal. But let's not forget, the Church has always used the language of creation to express the divine. Saint Francis of Assisi, the Church's patron of ecology, spoke of the sun as brother sun and the moon as sister moon. But he never worshipped them. He praised God through them. Saint Thomas Aquinas, arguably the Church's most precise theologian, taught that creation is not the end, but the means, ordered to lead man to God. In his Summa Theologiae he writes, "The whole universe together participates more perfectly in the divine goodness than any single creature. In other words, it takes the whole world to reflect the full beauty of the Creator." That's the heart of this new Mass. Not to exalt creation above God, but to recognize it as the canvas on which God paints His glory. Much of the language in this new Mass is drawn directly or indirectly from Laudato Si', Pope Francis's landmark encyclical. Terms like integral ecology, our common home, harmony with all creatures, are now woven into the Church's liturgical vocabulary. But what do they really mean? Integral ecology means understanding that everything is connected: the environment, the poor, the economy, the human soul. You cannot harm one without affecting the others. Our common home refers to the planet not as a political zone, but as a shared gift, a sacred inheritance we all must protect. Harmony with all creatures doesn't mean equality with animals. It means living in right relationship, with nature, with each other, and with God. When Pope Leo celebrates this Mass, he's not just adopting new vocabulary. He's integrating a spiritual vision that sees the liturgy not as an escape from the world, but as a way to heal it. Whether this new votive Mass becomes widely celebrated or remains a niche option will depend on many factors: local bishops, priests, the faithful. But its introduction already signals something deeper. The Church is expanding her liturgical voice. She's not replacing the ancient. She's adding to the present. And while the Mass for the care of creation draws attention now, it fits into a much broader pattern. The Church has long used votive Masses to focus hearts on urgent needs. Masses for peace during war. Masses for rain during drought. Masses for vocations in times of priestly shortage. And now, a Mass for creation, in a time of ecological uncertainty. This is not a novelty. It's consistency. It's the Church responding to history with holiness. As the date approaches, anticipation builds. Not with viral headlines, but with silent expectation. What will the Pope say in his homily? What gestures will he make? What will the tone be, joyful, urgent, contemplative? And perhaps most significantly, will this Mass stir something deeper in the Church? Will it reignite our wonder for the world we've taken for granted? Will it draw new hearts to the altar, not through fear, but through beauty? Time will tell. But for now, we know this: on July 9th, in a small corner of Italy, the successor of Peter will lift a piece of bread and a cup of wine, not just for the salvation of souls, but in gratitude for stars, rivers, soil, and wind. For animals and oceans. For morning light and midnight silence. Because all of it, every single part of this creation, was once called very good. And the Church, even now, still believes it. As the Church quietly embraces a new Mass for the care of creation, many Catholics are feeling a mixture of curiosity and confusion. The prayers are beautiful. The intention is holy. The theology is sound. And yet there's a lingering ache, a question whispered in pews, private forums, and sacristies across the world. Why now? And why this, while something so ancient is being silenced? This is the deeper tension rippling beneath the Vatican's peaceful announcement. Because while the Church is presenting this new liturgical development as a step forward, many faithful still feel like something essential is being left behind. To understand the depth of this feeling, we must talk about the elephant in the sanctuary, the traditional Latin Mass, TLM. The wound that hasn't healed. 2 years ago, the Vatican released Traditionis Custodes, a motu proprio issued by Pope Francis that significantly restricted the celebration of the traditional Latin. Massachusetts bishops were instructed to limit its use, prevent new groups from forming around it, and ensure it was not promoted in parishes. The justification given was unity. The TLM, according to the decree, had become a source of division. But was that the full picture? Not long ago, an internal Vatican document was leaked to the press. It had been compiled before the decree was finalized. And according to those who have seen it, the tone and conclusions were far more measured. It suggested that while tensions existed in some places, they were not widespread or unmanageable. In fact, many bishops reportedly felt the TLM communities in their dioceses were peaceful, faithful, and pastorally fruitful. The Vatican acknowledged the leak but dismissed it as incomplete. Still, the damage was done. For many traditional Catholics, it confirmed what they feared, that the restrictions were not just pastoral, but political. And so, when the news broke that a new Mass, with new language, new intentions, and new ecological vocabulary, was being elevated while the Latin Mass was being minimized, it struck a nerve. Not because they oppose environmental care. Not because they reject change. But because it feels like a contradiction. Imagine this: a Mass that has formed saints for centuries, with roots deep in the early Church, is now pushed to the margins, while a brand new Mass, based on a 2015 encyclical, is introduced with symbolic support from the Pope himself. The contrast is stark. And many Catholics are asking, what message is being sent? Is the Church prioritizing modern concerns over sacred tradition? Is she moving toward novelty at the expense of reverence? Are we celebrating creation while quietly suppressing centuries of spiritual inheritance? To be clear, the new Mass for the care of creation is not to blame. Its purpose is good. Its tone is holy. The questions arise not because of what it is, but because of what it's juxtaposed against. This moment reveals a deeper issue, a trust gap. Many faithful feel that decisions about the liturgy are being made from a place of ideology, not theology. They're not just mourning the loss of a liturgical form, they're mourning the loss of liturgical stability. Voices from the Church. Let's hear what some of those affected are saying. Bishop Joseph Strickland, now Bishop Emeritus of Tyler, has spoken candidly about his disappointment. Reflecting on both the TLM restrictions and the new environmental Mass, he said, "There's a double standard. Bishops who resisted Benedict's support for the Latin Mass faced no consequences. But those hesitant to implement the restrictions now, many are sidelined." He continued, "It's not about politics. It's about worship. About giving God what is due to Him in the way the Church has always known." Many younger priests, too, feel caught in the middle. Ordained in the post-Vatican II Church, yet drawn to the reverence and mystery of the old rite, they now find themselves restricted, watched. One priest said privately, "I'm just glad I was ordained before the crackdown. Today, I'd probably be sent for retraining if I asked to say the Latin Massachusetts." And among the laity, the feeling is no different. For decades, Catholics were told the Church is a big tent, that different expressions of faith and liturgy could coexist. Now, many feel that tent is being narrowed, just as the world grows more hostile to faith. Reverence versus relevance? The debate is not simply liturgical. It's philosophical. On one side, there's a push for relevance, for liturgies that speak directly to modern concerns: ecology, peace, migration, poverty. These are good, urgent issues. But some fear they're being wrapped in liturgical garments that, if not handled carefully, could water down the sacredness of the Mass. On the other side, there's a hunger for reverence, for liturgies that emphasize transcendence, mystery, and silence. Liturgies that are not about us, but about Him. Liturgies that feel timeless because they are. The Church, ideally, should embrace both. But right now, it feels like a choice is being forced. And that's why the Mass for the care of creation, though beautiful, is being received with hesitance in some circles. Not because it's bad, but because it's emerging during a time of liturgical pain. So where does Pope Leo stand in all this? He has not said much publicly about the traditional Latin Massachusetts. He has not reversed the restrictions. But he has not expanded them either. His approach so far appears cautious, deliberate, maybe even pastoral in a way that's hard to see at first glance. And maybe that's why he's choosing to celebrate the Mass for the care of creation in private. Not in St. Peter's Basilica. Not on television. Not even in a large parish. Just a small chapel in Castel Gandolfo. A quiet setting. A symbolic act. He knows the church is hurting. He knows the faithful are watching. And perhaps, through this simple liturgy, he's trying to do two things at once. Signal the importance of caring for the world God made, without rubbing salt into the wounds of those still grieving the loss of another liturgical treasure. It's a delicate balance. And time will tell if it works. What this tension reveals. This whole moment, new Mass, old restrictions, quiet rollout, reveals something deeper than liturgical preference. It reveals a church still wrestling with her identity. How do we honor tradition while responding to new challenges? Can we adopt modern language without losing timeless reverence? Is it possible to care for the earth without drifting into eco-spirituality? And can we embrace innovation without discarding the wisdom of the past? These are not simple questions. But they are worth asking. Because if the church gets this wrong, if she swings too far in either direction, she risks losing something irreplaceable, her unity. Maybe the answer is not either or. Maybe it's the ancient Catholic principle of both and. Both creation and tradition. Both reverence and relevance. Both the voice of St. Francis and the voice of St. Thomas. It is possible to pray for rivers and forests, and still kneel before an altar draped in Latin silence. It is possible to lift the host in Castel Gandolfo, and still hear the echoes of Gregorian chants sung in shadowy cathedrals. It is possible to honor God by caring for the world, and by treasuring the Mass that brought countless souls to Him. This is the beauty of Catholicism. It is wide. It is deep. It is not either or. It is everything in right order. As Pope Leo lifts the chalice on July 9th, Catholics across the world will be watching, not just out of curiosity, but out of hope. Hope that this Mass will inspire care, not controversy. Hope that it will point toward heaven, not just back to the earth. Hope that it will unite, not divide. And perhaps, just perhaps, Pope Leo's quiet gesture will open the door to reconciliation. Because if the Church can create a new Mass to honor the earth, maybe she can also find a way to honor the Mass that brought her to this moment. The traditional Latin Mass may be sidelined, but it is not forgotten. And for many, it is still the place where they most clearly hear the voice of God. Let's pray that Pope Leo, even as he introduces something new, also has the courage to safeguard what is old, not just in theory, but in practice. Because the Church does not build by tearing down. She builds by remembering. And the Mass, whatever form it takes, is not ultimately about politics or preference. It's about worship. It's about Christ. And it must always, always lead us there. July 9th arrived with little noise. No processions. No cameras. No papal audience square packed with pilgrims waving flags. Just a garden chapel tucked within the lush hills of Castel Gandolfo, and a pope standing before an altar with the soft hum of birds and wind for music. It was here, among olive trees and ancient Roman stones, that Pope Leo XIV quietly made history, celebrating the newly approved Mass for the care of creation for the very first time. He said no bold words into microphones. He offered no thunderous decree. Instead, he prayed. He lifted his hands not in political protest but in praise. He held up the host not in defiance, but in surrender. And as he spoke the new prayers, tailored to reflect the beauty and fragility of God's creation, something became clear. This Mass was never about spectacle. It was about signaling a deeper movement within the Church. A movement not of rebellion, but of integration. A movement that asks, can we speak to the modern world without silencing ancient voices? When liturgy becomes language. In Catholicism, the liturgy is not just a ceremony, it is a living language. It speaks to God. It speaks to us. And, in a way, it speaks for the Church. Every change, every new formulation, every addition to the Missal is not just ink on a page. It is a message. It says something about who we are, what we believe, and what matters now. The Mass for the Care of Creation says this. We see the earth not as background scenery, but as sacred inheritance. We recognize the cry of the poor and the cry of the planet as interconnected. We are called not just to consume creation, but to contemplate it. It's a powerful message. And if rooted deeply in truth, it can elevate the faithful toward awe, wonder, and worship. But the Church must be cautious. Because liturgical innovation without reverent anchoring can drift into performance. A word of caution. In recent decades, we've seen what happens when the Mass becomes a tool for messaging rather than a sacred encounter. Liturgies filled with banners, clowns, dramatizations, and ad-libs did more than confuse the faithful, they wounded them. They took something eternal and made it feel disposable. This is the fear some Catholics carry when they hear about new Masses. Not because they oppose beauty, but because they fear distraction. They fear the Mass becoming more about what we feel, and less about who God is. That's why, for all its positive intent, the Mass for the care of creation must be handled with spiritual maturity. Priests must approach it with the same reverence they would any solemn high Massachusetts bishops must ensure that its language elevates, not dilutes. And the Vatican must remember, the liturgy is not where we experiment, it is where we worship. So, what's next? After July 9th, the Mass for the care of creation will be made available across the world, like the other 49 votive Masses already in the Roman Missal. Parishes may choose to use it on days of ecological focus, during Laudato Si week, or even in moments of environmental disaster, like drought, fire, or floods. But the question remains, will it be adopted widely? That depends. Not just on the need, but on the tone. If the Mass is celebrated with dignity and framed in the context of Catholic theology, not environmental ideology, it could bear tremendous fruit. It could reawaken a sense of wonder. It could bring together science and spirituality. It could give Catholics a way to respond to global crisis not through panic, but through prayer. But if it is used to push agendas, if it becomes theatrical, if it replaces the sacred silence with climate slogans, it will fail. Because the faithful are starving for reverence, not relevance. Pope Leo's great test. In many ways, this moment is a test for Pope Leo XIV's papacy. He inherited a church divided over liturgy, wounded by scandal, and uncertain about the future. But he also inherited something beautiful, a church rich with saints, sacraments, and centuries of wisdom. Now, he stands at the intersection of continuity and change. And how he walks that line will define his legacy. With the celebration of the Mass for the care of creation, Pope Leo has made his first bold liturgical gesture. But he did it gently. Privately. Without fanfare. That alone speaks volumes. Perhaps he understands that we live in a time of liturgical fragility. That even the slightest movement can shake the faith of millions. So instead of rushing forward, he's treading softly. And maybe that's the grace of this moment. A vision for unity. What if this new Mass wasn't meant to divide, but to heal? What if it was never intended to replace tradition, but to remind us that tradition is not afraid of new expressions, as long as they remain faithful? What if the Mass for creation becomes a bridge? A bridge between the silence of Latin and the poetry of Psalms. A bridge between old stone altars and fertile earth. A bridge between those who long for mystery and those who seek meaning in the modern world. We've seen this work before. In the Eastern churches, liturgical development often happens organically, slowly, reverently, without uprooting what came before. Can the Roman Church follow that same wisdom? Can she build without destroying? Can she add without subtracting? A message to the faithful. If you're someone who loves the traditional Latin Mass, this moment might feel bittersweet. You're watching something new rise while something you cherish fades into the background. But take heart. The Mass has always endured, through empires, reforms, persecutions, and confusion. And if you truly believe in its power, then keep showing up. Keep kneeling. Keep praying. Your reverence is a witness. And if you're someone excited about the Mass for creation, rejoice, but tread humbly. This is not a blank slate. It's a page added to a sacred book. Celebrate it with care, with love for the earth, but more importantly, with love for the one who made it. Because ultimately, that's what this is about. Not the planet. Not the politics. Not the liturgical preferences. God. The Church can, and must, speak to every age. But she does not do this by copying the culture. She does it by drawing the culture into the sacred. The Mass for the care of creation can be part of that sacred witness, but only if we keep first things first. The altar is not a stage. The priest is not a performer. The Mass is not a medium for messaging. It is the highest form of worship on earth. And whether it is celebrated in Latin or in English, in a stone cathedral or a garden chapel, with old prayers or new intentions, its power comes not from us, but from the presence of Christ. That's what we must protect. That's what we must proclaim. That's what we must remember. So, as Pope Leo lowers the chalice, whispers the final prayer, and walks away from Castel Gandolfo's humble altar, the world continues to turn. But something has shifted. Not just in the Missal. Not just in the headlines. But perhaps, in the heart of the Church. A new Mass has begun. Now let's pray the Church remembers where she started. And where she's always meant to go. Back to the altar. Back to reverence. Back to God. This was Messenger of God. See you in the next.